Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
Well, the Babog of Leinster House is missing. He didn't show up for work, and Mary Lou is not very, very happy. She said there's a housing crisis, a hospital crisis, cost of living crisis, and apparently Simon is on the phone.
Yes, Mary Lou, of course, is highlighting what we all know about. And this in 2024, April 2024, the hospital crisis is still ongoing, costing a fortune and not fit for purpose. And I think she mentioned the amount of 600 and odd people are thereabouts on trolleys. And let's hope nobody just gives them a push and out the door and down the street. We find that people that are on trolleys could be subjected to various uh, problems being on trolleys because there's an assortment of individuals and some perhaps with drug addictions, and they could be talking through their hat, if you know what I mean. With the hospitals, and it wouldn't be about time for them to sort of rectify the problem in hospitals and perhaps open some new hospitals, not at 4 billion as the Children's Hospital in James Street, the worst site in the country. They could have opened maybe 5 or 6 hospitals with far less money than what one hospital is costing. So if they can't get that right, what will they ever get right?
I think Simon Harris, like he's a very, very young Taoiseach. I think he's transitioned from a national politician to an international politician. He'll come under a lot of pressure. He's going to be speaking to the UK Prime Minister, the Northern Ireland ministers. He's talking to the President of Ukraine, and he's to go to Brussels and Warsaw as well. So, I mean, like he's going from being a politician that was in a bubble in Ireland, and he was responsible at one point for looking after hospitals and stuff. But now it's one thing to be looking after hospitals in Ireland, but now he'll be talking about hospitals that are bombed in Ukraine, you know. So he's going on to an international stage now, and some would argue maybe that, you know, is he good for the stage? Is he not? Is he capable? You know, I mean, time will tell.
And he's been a minister, and of course, if you're a minister, even if you go down a road that a lot of us wouldn't approve of, we're pro-life and pro-family, and their agenda seemed to be completely the opposite of that. So he was part of that, shall we say, team, and jollity wasn't one of their main features. They had an agenda, and they were going to push it whether we liked it or not. Now, the fact of the matter is that if he's now dealing with international affairs, and the people are objecting that he wasn't in the Dáil, they probably must be aware of that sort of responsibility, but they focus on what they regard as important and perhaps what people regard as important. But at the same time, the lady that spoke, and she was fairly good, I thought, spokesman, not. I think she might be something to do with the North man from Roscommon, but maybe not. But suffice to say, I thought she was fairly competent.
You're referring to the
And
chief whip
but
there.
all the rules and regulations and time of this and time of that, I would find that a very tedious type of an affair. That business can be done with a more human touch. It sounded very, what's the word? I wouldn't know where I stood with all the like of that. And various people made speeches, all not too happy with Mr. Harris not being there. But I think that Mrs. Norton, when she was speaking, could have anticipated that. But whether they let things go the way they go is just wondering. But I know it was me, and I knew that Mr. Harris today was having to deal with international affairs, um, when really he has to sort of introduce himself, I presume, and because they want to be reassured that there's not going to be some big change or something like that. So, but if that had been explained in the beginning, then it might have spoiled the thunder of the opposition, because he has to do certain things that he didn't have to do before. But being a minister, he would have been in Europe and he would have had a fair idea of the way business was run. Because, if you're on a football team, you have a fair idea that the goal is down there, and if you're a back, your main business is to stop the other ones scored in your end of the pitch. So they're all playing, they're all on the team, and but because of the policies that they inflicted on the people over the tenure of the Fine Gael government, and the disrespect for the life. I showed you a picture there, and showed you a picture of the feet of a 10-year-old child. Sorry, a
Yeah,
10-week-old
if you turn it
child.
around, yeah, it's grand, yeah.
The way you see the way the brain works. 10 weeks.
Yeah,
Just look at those lovely feet.
little feet, yeah.
Now, this was brought, and one has to congratulate Bernadette Smith, that great pro-life advocate in Northern Ireland, 6 counties, and she does have to be in court. She gets persecuted that we don't hear too much about down here because of the agenda. Now, uh, Simon Harris is a young man in a hurry, I presume. He's top of the three, shall we say, at a comparatively young age, but he has been a minister. So even though he doesn't have much experience of the world, having to earn a crust, the same as the rest of us, and put up with this, that, and the other, and various policies that governments pursue, that doesn't exactly do us good. I mentioned when I was uh, trying to buy a house years and years ago, the mortgage rate was 17%, and you're put to the pin of your collar, the same as the worst now. They're put to the pin of the collar, to the collar, and without a doubt, one of the main things, aside from the shortage of houses, I never saw so many houses in my lifetime built. But I don't know who is occupying them. In a lot of places, they're too expensive, except down the country, not too bad. But I think, as regards the housing crisis, it's the high price of houses. And they'd want to focus on that and reduce those prices the same as they do in Dublin.
Mm, I
Sorry,
just
in Europe.
I just want to
You
go
get me,
back
Fred?
to, yeah, I know, I do, but we want to discuss here that Simon, the baby of Leinster House, is absent from work, and we want to dig into that a little bit more, if you don't mind, John Malone, this hour of the morning, okay? So the thing about it is, I mean, the chief whip has mentioned, okay, that Simon is on phone calls, and that's very, very good that he's doing some international business there. He's doing what a Taoiseach should do. But the problem I have with it is that the question Mary Lou should have asked is, she should have asked, well, if he's making international phone calls, why can't he make an international phone call to us if he's abroad or wherever he is? And why isn't there a screen on the Dáil that brings up Simon when he's abroad so that he can answer leaders' questions, it's question time. So there's enough technology there for Simon to be in the Dáil when he's not actually in the Dáil. So they're the questions Mary Lou should be asking, and the rest of the politicians, that there should be some kind of technology, which there actually is, loads of kind of for conferencing and stuff. That's what they should be looking at.
Well, the trouble is, Oliver, that there's only so much the upstairs department can do, and none of us are all things this way, that way, the other way. And when you're dealing with international affairs, shall we say, there are problems, as we know, in the world, uh, even probably more severe than here. Sometimes we engineer problems that there should be solutions. For example, the people on trolleys, there should be solutions for that, and it's a question of building more hospitals at a reasonable cost, not 4 billion for what they have in James Street. So, look, there's problems, But the price of houses in Dublin is, to my way of thinking, a disaster. If people can't afford to buy their houses or rent at reasonable rents, we mentioned this yesterday, I'm mentioning it again. That is the problem. And it seems that some politicians own property. Now, I'm not saying to have an agenda to have high rents. They're probably reasonable in many ways, for all I know. But I'm just saying that is the main problem, that the price of houses should be reduced forthwith, irrespective of people thinking that they're going to be able to sell their place, a 3 bedroom monstrosity in some part of Dublin, and then head over to France and buy perhaps a chateau. Do you get me drift?
I do indeed, John Malone.
A bit of common sense. I'm long enough in the tooth going around, and I've seen when you're in business, you have to deal pragmatically and practically with people and staff, and that's, and treat them with what I call respect and a little bit of jollity. Funny enough, I don't see too much jollity in this in the Dáil. I presume there is perhaps behind the scenes. Perhaps they take themselves very serious. But I think going back over the years, there was more, generally speaking, a bit of cut and thrust and a bit of jollity. There seems no jollity there. To me, it looks like some kind of like it's a wake. And if you step out of line there, my goodness, you're pounced on. It's worse than the rugby. If a fella has the ball and he doesn't run fast enough because they pounce on him, I don't know how he gets out alive. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, John Malone. Absolutely. Look, so we can only hope that Simon will return and that he will make everybody very, very happy in the Leinster House, and that he has an explanation, a proper explanation as to why there is no technology in Leinster House to avail for that he can avail of to address the House. And we look forward to his replies.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is that there's only in life there's only one job you can do at a time. It's very hard to multitask.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the same time, I think if had been in the Dáil, we say early before he was talking, he said, "I hope you'll excuse me. There's other chores to be done. I'm going to address the problems that I spoke about and do the best I can." Do you see where I'm coming from?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm expecting to have to speak to the British Prime Minister and some other individuals, uh, jobs that he didn't do before. I hope you'll understand. I think if you communicate and explain what you're about, people are happy enough about that. And if they complain then in some way, well, then they're at fault. Isn't that right? So if you give an explanation about why you have to just concentrate for a bit now on this international affair that heretofore you didn't have to deal with, but now you have to deal with it. And any Taoiseach that comes into the House and is elected Taoiseach, they will have to be doing the same, even though they'd like to be in the House more frequent, but they have to do little chores that require their attention, and apologize for that and say, I hope you'll understand. Isn't that the way to do things?
John Malone, you're a man of absolute fantastic wisdom.
Well, you see, you get this with age. And if you have it when you're young, you can thank your lucky stars and thank the man above, and
Absolutely.
a few prayers and thanksgiving. I don't hear much prayers in that house. Perhaps they start off with the Our Father, Hail Mary, and God be Father, but I don't hear much about that. Do you?
Yeah, it would be nice if they went back
Bring
to.
down luck. You want to bring down luck on the house, and adopt that attitude of respect. When you do that, it's in your system. You still make what your views, but it be couched in some ways with respect. Now, when Mary Lou and all these was complaining about your man being absent, they must have known that he was dealing with all these other issues. But they're playing to the gallery too. I think that business of all that sort of stuff, it doesn't do any good for yours truly. I don't see that as what I call progress or respect. I'd like to see something by way of understanding.
Yeah, look,
What's the point
the
of four?
thing about it is, look, I can see her point in a way, in the sense that, like, even if he showed up for an hour or two, it doesn't look good when he just does a no show. And I know he has international business to do and the whole lot. But as I go back to the question is, surely to God, they can put technology into the Dáil. He can phone in, or he can do a Zoom, or he can do whatever he's to do, but to be there in some form or other for an hour, 2 hours,
I think that if he could have mentioned that these issues were coming up to be dealt with, and he'd hope they'd understand, because he wants to concentrate on the items affecting this country. But in the meantime, he has to spend a little bit of time dealing with these other people that have that are important to talk to. And I hope he does. I think if you explain to people, isn't that the way to do it?
that's it.
Isn't that the way to do it, rather than the sort of exchange that occurred this morning, which I saw, and I thought, well, I wouldn't like to be in Mr. Simon Harris. My ears would be red. Get me drift. I think, however, I prefer to see dialogue, not constant criticism, quite frankly. How can you do anything in work? If you were in work and you were dealing with all this negativity, how would you be able to do your work?
Absolutely,
Think
absolutely.
of it that way.
And you mentioned a good point there. The chief whip was actually very good. That lady you were speaking about. So
Good.
look,
And I have to compliment her. And but there were so many bits of 5 minutes here. I thought to myself, goodness, keep it simple.
mhm.
With all that rigmarole that you come out with, and she had to read it because she couldn't possibly know that off by heart. Do you see? And I see a lot of the people looking at whatever they've written down. So you've got to speak something from here. I'm not looking at anything that's written down, am I?
Yeah, I suppose
So
the other thing is there was a lot of people in the house. I know they were doing some business stuff as well, but there was a lot of people in the house, and I suppose they were probably a little bit disappointed that he wasn't there as well.
yeah. Well, at the same time, I know if I was there, um, and was in opposition, I think myself, I would try to elucidate what was you know um, deal with, and the chief whip, that lady, Mrs. Norton. She was quite good, and she said it then at the tail end, like what he was doing. But you see, it doesn't seem to satisfy the opposition in some ways. But at least she gave an explanation, and that's good. But I think if the people that were criticising his absence, I think if he had communicated that he would be missing for a little period this morning, because of the fact that he was having to take calls from international, the British Prime Minister and various other ones, and that he'd hope they'd understand, that that's a part of his portfolio now, that he's Taoiseach stroke Prime Minister. I think, isn't that the way to do it? And by all means have debates and that, but I think what they pursued since we're in power has kind of upset a lot of people, including the public. You can't, never mind treating the, you can't treat the Irish people the way they were treated under the leadership of Mr. Barricker. And we feel that Mr. Harris, the short time he has this Taoiseach before the election, will try to do some good for the Irish people. We outlined it yesterday by way of all the people that's in, to encourage them with grants to perhaps benefit their own country. So, and the price of houses, aside from all the houses building, you've got to deal with the price. They're far too expensive. They're only worth a quarter, if that. And that's the way to go.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Alan.